records. Smell the cover, read all the verses. Tell me about your favorites on vinyl and vision.
Whoa! That song's awesome. That's the opening track from the Flying Lutenbachers' album Destroy All Music, Demonic Velocities. Happens to be one that I like a lot. There are many Flying Lutenbacher records, so it's really hard to choose just one very small little segment of a song to give an introduction to my guest tonight, Weasel Walter. So I've decided to kind of create a little bit of a medley. So you'll probably be hearing selections from that record, from the Flying Lutenbachers, also songs from Cellular Chaos, Diamond Teeth Clenched, which Weasel kind of referred to me. He suggested it to me if I liked more of his rock side. But I also actually asked him about some jazz music, because jazz is something that I'm interested in that I'm not really knowledgeable in at all. So but I know that he actually does some really legit jazz music. It's avant-garde and kind of like free jazz stuff, but it's still like legit jazz music. So from what I experimented with, Weasel suggested Firestorm, which I listened to, and so I may play a little bit of that in this medley as well. One I found on my own was actually Jazz Free, a connective improvisation, I believe is what it was called, and it actually had some really great players, including Nels Klein on it, which kind of was what dragged me into it, because I'm not a fan of his, but I know his name, and I've kind of known some of the music that he's done, and so I was kind of interested in hearing what that would be like, and that one actually is very cool. So I will play a selection off that record as well in the medley. Probably the first track off the record, Focus on Fifths, which was pretty cool song. So I gotta get right into this because it's not too long, but it's kind of a lengthy episode. Weasel decided to choose the album De Mysteriis Dom Sathanas by Mayhem. For those of you who are unknowledgeable of Mayhem, they are a black Norwegian metal band, and they are probably the quintessential black Norwegian black metal band. They're kind of the ones that started it all off, and they have a really crazy and chaotic story of the way that they kind of came to be, and that this record that he chose, how that came to be was pretty disturbing, really. So we get into it a little bit. It's not really the focal point, and it shouldn't be, because it's really about the music, and I acknowledge that. I mean, I had my questionings, I had my kind of like my reservations and my doubts about this band and this music and this record, but I wanted to hear it from Weasel, and he set me straight, and he kind of he was really able to put it in a different perspective for me, much more digestible for me. So let's get right into it, okay? Thank you for tuning in, first and foremost. We here at Vinyl Vision ask you to do all the things that you do with the internet, please, except that. Don't do that. That's private time. If you like, share, subscribe, comment, and rate and review, all those things that everybody asks on the podcasts. Yeah, stay tuned for a little bit of a selection from one of Weasel's other bands, Cellular Chaos, at the end of the show. And, enjoy. Thanks.
Yes. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm okay in theory.
Oh, really? Is there something going on? Is there?
Oh, well, I'm really sick of this epidemic. I would like to go back on tour.
Oh, right. Well, That goes without.
But I'm not like, I guess I'm not really original in the sense that there's things I'd rather be doing than sitting around waiting for the epidemic to end. But,
Right.
That's how it goes, right?
Yeah, I mean, well,
It's
it's a first for us all. I mean, none of us know how to deal with this exactly. So
yeah. I mean, it's a drag for everybody. I know, it's whatever. So
well, I was going to
gotta
ask
try to
you.
hang in there and just ride it out, I guess.
Yeah, tell me about it. I mean, I was looking over your website, kind of looking over the discography, and it is extensive for sure.
Yeah, well, I've been busy. Music is basically what I've done for the last 30 odd years. So people sometimes say to me, geez, Weez, how did you do so much stuff? I was like, this is all I do.
Right. Yeah.
It's not a hobby, I don't do it when it's convenient. I do it sort of all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've always had the muse, and I just figured while the getting's good, I should just seize the day and do what I do and do as much of it as possible.
Yeah. So with you having mentioned, the pandemic and it driving you crazy, what are you doing to fill this time, considering you're not touring?
Lately, I've been a little lacking in motivation, which I need to turn around. In the last month, I prepared 4 masters, artwork and audio for 4 releases, one of which is the new Flying Lutenbachers album that will be out by July. It's called Negative Infinity. I personally think it might be the best Flying Lutenbachers album. People can argue with me about that and have their own opinion, but in terms of my own goals, I think it's the best album the band's ever made.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily tend to think each album is the best one I've ever made. So there's that. There's a reissue of an old Lutenbachers album called Cataclysm from 2006. And that is now a double vinyl LP with a live DVD of the band playing a complete concert with multicam video and multi-track audio. So I've been sitting on that for more than 15 years, and that thing is finally getting released. And then a couple of free jazz things on my label. So this summer, by the summer, I'll have 4 new releases that I'm really proud of. And that was kind of like what I did this month. I don't know.
Just this month. We've been in the pandemic for the whole past year.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the past year was pretty interesting. I was in quarantine for about 3 months in Chicago with family, and I wound up writing the new album.
Oh.
When I got back in June or whatever, I started whipping my band into shape, and we did rehearsals for, I don't know. We rehearsed until December and basically recorded that album, knocked that out. That was a lot of work because the new album's very through composed, whereas the last 2 were very improvised. So this is a lot more. The new Lutenbachers album is more of what I would call a brutal prog album. And I'm really happy with it. So it was a lot of work, it was a lot of begging my musicians to learn their parts and stuff like that. But they did, and they played well. We always do these records pretty much live in the studio. So people have to know what they're doing, and everybody played great. So I'm very psyched about it. It sounds like a real band is playing real songs, and they're crazy. And I don't know. I'm only in one band right now, and I find that kind of depressing. It's the first time in my life I've ever only been in one band, but it's a little hard to organize these things given the circumstances.
Yeah. So, I mean, you attribute that to the pandemic, not just because of the timing.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
Also, I think that I've been through a lot of so-called scenes, and I think that there are cycles and seasons in terms of activity when you talk about scenes. And right now, even if there wasn't an epidemic, I feel like for me, New York is a little, what would it be, bearish? Is that when it's down?
I'm not sure.
So, after periods of activity, sometimes there's periods that aren't so active. And I start looking around and trying to see maybe if there's a different town I want to be in, or a different scene, or different people I want to work with. But given the epidemic, it's a little hard to make a escape route right now because there ain't much happening anywhere. So I'm just sitting tight and trying not to get too stressed about it. I guess I'm a type A music maker. I really feel like I always have to be doing something, and that's just how it goes.
Yeah.
This is a very special paradigm we're in right now.
For sure, very unique. So, well, let's get right into it because I was very interested in talking with you. I know that I think everyone that will be listening to this probably already knows very much about at least something of you, probably a number of projects that you have been part of, because there have been so many.
Yeah.
So one of the things I like to do here is discuss, kind of like where it began for you musically. So because I knew that you were born and raised in Rockland in Illinois, right? Is that right?
Rockford, Illinois,
Rockford, Illinois.
which is, yeah, it's by the Wisconsin border. It's about 150,000 people. Cheap Trick are from there.
Yes.
The comedian Natasha Leggero is from there. I used to go to high school with her, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, it's pretty, it's sort of a big, small town.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I was fortunate because in the 80s, when I was growing up, there was one very good exposure to weird music on TV vis-a-vis a USA Network show that was on every weekend called Night Flight. And that is when the 13-year-old Weasel Walter saw The Residents for the first time.
Yeah.
And saw the amazing concert movie Erg, A Music War, which is like 30 incredible new wave bands. And we also had three great record stores. At that point, there was no internet, so people didn't know what was cool. So you could buy the greatest records you'd ever heard in your life for $1 out of the budget bin because no one else wanted them. And there was even a punk club around the mid 80s that kids could go to. So in a weird way, it wasn't a bad place to be for exposure to alternative musics and culture,
right?
Despite being kind of a podunk town, really.
Yeah, from the research I learned about you, it seems that you got into music early.
I guess I did. I was really into comic books and drawing when I was a kid. I aspired to be a sort of Jack Kirby type comic book artist, but when I got bit by the music bug, I would say 9-10 years old, I really started getting more and more interested in music. I did drawing on the side, and eventually by my teen years, music had eclipsed everything, and I was dead set on becoming a musician. So
yeah,
I would say it was early, but I would also say that I'm mostly self-taught. I would not consider myself a prodigy in the slightest.
No.
In fact, my skills were extremely crude when I was young because I didn't have a lot of instruction. And people who heard my early music thought I was about as talentless as it came and that I would never accomplish anything.
Right.
So I'm sort of a result of sheer force of will and trying to learn and get better. And I'm a bit self-made in a lot of regards.
Okay. Well, so with that being said, when was the first, how old were you when you started your first band, and when was your first recording?
I started messing around playing bass, which was kind of my first instrument.
Okay.
And I did have a few years of lessons, so I could understand the basics of music theory. And I started, I think when maybe I was, 11, 12, I was screwing around with friends in basements, just kind of having no clue how to write a composition or a song and trying to play like little riffs I knew or made up or parts that were in pieces of music that I had to learn for my lessons. It didn't really amount to anything. I didn't know how to write a song. I think that hearing punk and making the connection about bar chords and root movements in music gave me the keys to writing my first songs. I would say my first real band was a hardcore band called Chernobyl Children that I was in 1986, and that was a real current events band name, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And we played short, obnoxious, hardcore songs that had maybe 3 chords tops. It didn't last very long. There wasn't much to do. I played one gig with the band at a roller rink, and it was a total disaster. But I kept trying. I kept aspiring to play music. I was also into the no wave stuff pretty early. So my next band was an attempt at doing that stuff. And it's funny because we used to do, covers by people like Flipper, Contortions, Eight Eyed Spy. And then later on, I went on to play with Lydia Lunch. So there was sort of a closed circle there as far as influences go. But I would say my first real band that ever did anything was the Flying Lutenbachers, which was formed in late 91. That was the first band I was ever in that had its shit together and released a real recording. So.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. So now you said that the first band, it was kind of like a hardcore band. So what kind of music?
It was definitely a hardcore band.
So what kind of music were you listening to at that young age?
When I was 15 or 14, I guess, when that happened, I was really into like British punk, especially The Damned was a big thing for me. I liked their attitude and their chaos and the songwriting and the musicianship and stuff like that. Punk in general was a pretty big influence on me. Not so much hardcore, but it was sort of more rock and roll type punk music. I thought hardcore at the time was a bit bland and anonymous. I had to go back later and sort of dig through the oeuvre to find the stuff that was actually interesting. But I was more into sort of like song writing-ish punk rock, but I wanted to hear weirder music. So I was into stuff like The Residents and the no wave bands. And by the time I was 16, I was a hardcore free jazz head. So I grew up on classic rock radio. So there's something about good songwriting that appeals to my core beliefs. But also, obviously, I've done a lot of abstract music, and I've listened to, and I'm heavily influenced by a lot of abstract music. So I have this kind of duality of being sort of a classic rock guy and an avant-gardist, I guess, at the same time. It's kind of a weird paradox, but like when I was a kid, I was listening to Foreigner and Kiss on the radio, stuff like that. So.
Yeah. And that has its appeal for sure.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So let me go back a little further. So what was music like growing up in the house? Like, were you exposed to stuff by your parents or any siblings?
They had a record player and they had a few records because they had joined the Columbia Record Club at one point.
Oh, nice.
And how that worked was every month the Columbia Record Club would send you an order form and say, this is the record of the month. And if you didn't send the order form back, they would send you the record and bill you for it. So I think most of the records my parents had, they didn't even want. They sort of messed up and didn't send the voucher back.
Right.
So it was a pretty weird array of records, and there weren't any that I was particularly crazy about. But the first thing I was really into probably was Kiss. I think my first record was a Kiss record when I was very young. God.
Did you buy it or did somebody else in the house have it?
I got it for my birthday. I asked for it. I must have been, it must have been like 1978 or something like that. I mean, it was really young. And it was called Hotter Than Hell. And my parents took one look at that record and were just like, what is this? Yeah. They had heard of Kiss, but it was a rather lascivious album cover with naked babes on it. And it had the word HE double hockey stick on it. So I think my parents were a little kind of like, huh? But it only got worse from there. So,
Yeah, I can imagine.
the minute rock and roll entered the house, the profane obscenity began and only ramped up more and more as time went.
Right.
So, I mean, I had a few records when I was a real kiddie, like Kiss records. I had a few Split Ends records and stuff like that, some singles. But I turned into a pretty hardcore record collector by the time I was 13, 14 years old. And I was buying a lot of cutouts. I was buying a lot of weird records out of the budget bin for $1 and a lot of used records because I was reading a lot of books about stuff, especially weird bands and punk bands. And I would just go through, read, and I was just very, I wouldn't say I was OCD, but I was very, I was like a sponge, and I would just suck up all the information about the personnel and the records and stuff. I would just seek the stuff out, and it became an obsession of mine. So my parents aren't particularly musical. In fact, I would say they're not.
Yeah.
But they appreciate music for what it's worth, but they're not fans. They don't really pursue music. They're like a lot of people where music is just part of the paradigm. It's around, you hear it,
Right.
like it's fine.
But you don't see it.
So I wouldn't say I'm from a particularly musical family. I would say they weren't discouraging of my music. They were sort of a benign factor in it, where I think they sort of tolerated it and didn't try to discourage me from it. Yeah. But at the same time, it wasn't like they were really rooting for me. They did insist that I get music lessons when I started playing bass. So I guess I should thank them for it, because it did help me in the long run. So I don't know.
Yeah, they were hesitant to a degree, it sounds like, from what I've heard, but they still were supportive in some kind of, like, I don't know, some type of way.
I think the dilemma for them was that I was interested in the socio-political aspects of the music, i.e., I felt like an outcast, and I was definitely a loner, and I was really relating strongly to iconoclasm in music. And some of that iconoclasm was pretty controversial. And, I think it might have been hard for a parent, a working class parent in a bumfuck town in the 80s to watch their kid turn into a punk, and wonder what that's all about and what that means. That couldn't have been real easy for them.
Right. Yeah, no, I bet. I mean, so how do they feel about it now? I mean, what do they look back at this? How do they look back at this now?
They feel like they try to do what they did to sort of protect me from things that were bigger than me, that maybe were dangerous or could have harmed me. I felt like they were a little overprotective, but now as a parent, I kind of understand that. I get it, and I empathize with them for that. I think they respect me. I think they realize that I did what I set out to do with my life, and I did it all the way. And I think they respect that I was serious about what I was doing, and they see that I've made some kind of impact, and that I have a body of work, and that I've accomplished a lot of things. I didn't pick an easy path in life, clearly. So I'm sure that concerns them a lot.
Right.
Concerns me. So, there's that factor. But, my parents are good people. They're real working class people. They're not arty. They're not avant-garde in the slightest. I was definitely the freak of the family. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely understand that, and I can see that. I mean, I'm not saying that judgmentally. I'm just saying that I can understand what that must be like. I mean, I came from an immigrant family, so my family was kind of the same. I mean, my parents, they liked music to a degree. I mean, my father in particular definitely had a classic, what would be considered classic rock tendencies when I was young. Growing up in the house, there was some Supertramp tapes and some Clash and some Led Zeppelin. So, I mean, those were kind of formative and kind of cool for a dad. But and he was certainly supportive. But I mean, they think I'm still kind of weird. I mean, they don't mind that I'm weird, but it's cool,
I would say I'm weirder than they want to know about.
Oh yeah.
I would say they haven't. I don't think they try to dig real hard.
You're weirder than they have ever hoped for. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what can I say?
It's fine. Hey, it's working out for you. I mean, to some degree, it is what it is.
I don't think I'm hurting anybody, so
I wouldn't say so.
I'm not in jail.
There you go. Right. It could be worse. You could take after.
I'm not a drug addict. Like I have morals, and I have ethics and stuff like that. So I think they realize that, and they sort of, the rest of the cultural stuff, they're just kind of like, he's into this, whatever.
It's like we don't really know what he does. You know, we just kind of let him do what he does. You know,
Oh, they don't want to know all the gory details. I don't blame them.
yeah. Hey, did you say that you were a parent now?
I happen to have an 8-year-old daughter. Yes, I do.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, well, she will avenge me.
So
she's a real whippersnapper. She is her father's daughter
really?
in many, many ways.
Oh, okay.
She's pretty extreme. She definitely got a lot of things from her dad vis-a-vis the genes. So we'll see what she does to the world.
Yeah, I bet, right? That's kind of exciting. Exciting and frightening.
Yeah, you know, the process is somewhat painful, but that's how it goes. It's like,
yeah,
you know, life.
right. Yeah, no, it's a motherfucker. I mean, I actually have a couple more questions for you before we get into the album that you chose. Basically, I'd really love to understand or know about your relationship with vinyl records and how important it is to you to press records as an artist.
My relationship to records is that I grew up listening to them mainly because they were the cheapest format
At the time.
to get them. Yeah, at the time, because cassettes, when they came out, I think they cost more than LPs for some reason.
Yeah.
And you know, there was a fetishistic aspect, obviously, to having a pile of records. I mean, duh, that's what record collecting is all about. As time went on, when compact discs came out, they were more expensive than records also. And I was just like, who needs this crap? You know, records are fine. But then once the tables turned, in some ways, as far as fidelity goes, I'd rather have compact discs or digital music. I don't, this whole concept that vinyl is somehow superior is a very incorrect blanket statement. Some records do sound better than digital, and some digital sounds better than records. It kind of depends on the production and the quality involved. There's no truisms there. So I have, you know, I still have a record collection because I bought a ton of records, and I maybe have half of what I ever had because I've sold a lot of records so I could eat and pay my rent.
Right.
But there's some sentimental value to having LPs. So I still have them, and I listen to them. In fact, I'm in a project where I'm listening to all my rock records in alphabetical order by artist right now, and I'm in the R's. I'm listening to the Residents right now.
Nice.
So I'm literally like cycling through my record collection one by one just to make sure I'm hitting all the bases.
Yeah.
As far as making records, it's all fine and dandy. There's some demand for them. Some of my music, frankly, isn't popular enough to warrant being on vinyl because, you know, a lot of my avant-garde stuff has a pretty limited audience, and I am a poor person, so I can't really lose money making music. Right. I have to like make a profit or break even, which is funny because, as you know, my music's not commercial at all, but there is enough of a fan base, you know, that I can get by, and that's cool. So as far as something like the Flying Lutenbachers, there is a demand for vinyl, and it's strong enough to warrant pressing the records. So I'm happy to make them. But in a way, I see the digital version as the definitive version as far as the audio goes.
Okay.
Records to me, you know, when I put them next to digital masters, I often like the digital masters a lot more, to be frank.
Okay. So it's more of a collector's thing, the vinyl records, and you don't really care to be a collector at this point?
Not really. I would say per year, I buy maybe 6 LPs total. When I was a kid, LPs retailed for $6.98, $7.98, and then you had the cutout bin, which was like $2.99 to $4.99, and then you had the super budget bin, which was a lot of dollar records. So I don't know. I'm not flush with money, so I don't just buy things impulsively, you know, but I like to support artists that I like. So if I like some music, I'm happy to throw money at it because it's being part of a cycle of supporting music and stuff like that. Right. So
paying it forward a little bit.
Yeah. I'm a music fan first and foremost, and I like to give back to the artists. I know what's involved in being an artist, so I get it. I have some empathy. I don't think music is free. I don't think it comes without a price.
Right.
But I'm not like some extreme moralist about it, but I like to put my money where my mouth is sometimes.
Respectable. That's cool.
Yeah.
Where are you, by the way? Are you in New York?
I am in New York. I'm in Queens, New York. Beautiful Ridgewood. Yes.
All right. I just wanted to clear that up for myself. I didn't know if you were in Chicago or not.
Not right now, no. I sort of go between the two towns.
Okay. Cool. So
it's crazy and hectic.
Yes, no, I understand. Yeah, those are two crazy cities. Though I don't envy living in major cities like that. I've always been afraid of them, really.
Well, there's a lot of pressure, obviously. I moved to New York about 10 years ago. Well, it's been more than 10 years at this point, because I felt like at the time there was activity there and people to work with that I needed to be around. And it never really got easy per se. I've done a lot, but it's always kind of been a struggle, but I'm used to it. I just, I'm very focused on the end result and doing the work. So, it gets old sometimes fighting, pissing against the wind, but as long as I feel like there's something I really need to say with music, I'm going to try to say it. And there's still a lot I want to say. I don't just make music for the sake of it. I don't just crank out product just to put more crap out there. I feel like there's way too much music, and I feel like, who cares? So I do try to make sure that everything I bother to release, there's a real good point to it, and it's really strong, and it needs to exist. I don't just release stuff for the sake of it. My archives are so insane. I've released 1/5, like 1/50th of all the shit that I could release that I have tapes of, and
Right.
So I put out a lot of records, but if I wanted to just put out everything, I would have a million records. But there's stuff that people just don't. Why would I bother people with every fart I've ever done into a microphone? It doesn't make any sense.
Right. No, I get it.
Maybe some people think I have done that, but I assure you I haven't.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
All right. So now there's a very serious question I have to ask you based on the album that you chose for this evening.
Yes.
So you chose Mayhem's, correct me if I'm wrong, De Mysteriis Dom Sathanas? Did I say that right?
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that.
De Mysteriis Dom Sathanas, yeah.
Okay.
I just say it like an American. De Mysteriis Dom Sathanas.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds good. We'll go with that. So I understand you're a complicated individual with many influences. So how seriously do you take this album?
Musically, I take it very seriously. When I found this record, it was not long after it came out. I think I bought this record, I bought a CD of it in 1994 or 95.
94 is when it came out.
Think about that. And at the time, I had discovered death metal through a friend in 1993, and the stuff really blew my mind. I related to it so strongly. I always was sort of more on the punk side of the tracks, if you know what I mean. Like, I thought heavy metal was a bit ludicrous, and I grew up around stoner culture, and I just thought it kind of sucked. So I always had an aversion to heavy metal because I thought it was all guys going, what? Right. But when my friend Kevin Drum played me death metal, I was blown away at what alien noise it was. The first thing I heard, I think, was the second Deicide album, Legion. And I instantly loved it because it just sounded like H.R. Giger prog rock to me. I loved everything about it. And I also kind of liked the satanic edge of it. I would consider myself an atheist. I wouldn't consider myself a Satanist, but I did, when I was a young man, I liked the frisson of Satanism because it still had an effect. It had a power, and it was a fuck you thing.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't really relate to it in terms of, I thought that was a religion to be part of, and there was some anthropomorphic being named Satan that does things in the universe. It was more of a metaphorical thing, a la Anton LaVey, you know, the Satanic Bible or something. It's a bit more of a carny trick, like a fuck you to the bourgeoisie, as opposed to some hard and fast religion.
Right.
It was kind of an anti-religion. So I guess when I was a young man in my 20s, I liked that because it was controversial, and, you know, for me, it was very black humor related and cynical.
Okay.
So getting back to Mayhem, I was into what you would call sort of old school 90 or late 80s death metal, like this stuff like Morbid Angel, Deicide. You know, I can name a million names, doesn't even matter, but that was a very specific kind of metal, and it was death metal. I started hearing and reading about so-called black metal probably by 1994, and there were a lot of zines and stuff, and that music was a little controversial because it seemed to be pushing some of the aspects of Satanism a lot further than death metal. And it was in some ways a different stripe of music. It tended not to be as technical as death metal, and it owed more to sort of these dark thrash bands from the 80s and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I liked about it was, well, okay, so I had been reading about these bands and I had been buying stuff, but I had read about Mayhem and I had read about all this controversy surrounding the band, and it seemed interesting to me for what it's worth. I remember walking into a CD store in 1994, I think, either that or early 1995, and there was a copy of the Mayhem album, which was fairly recently released. So I put on the headphones and I listened to it, and immediately that opening riff from Funeral Fog just punched me in the face. It was melodic and angular, and I liked the constant blast beat drumming. I thought the singing was very unusual. I liked the clarity. I liked the ambience of the whole thing, which seemed to be massive and gigantic. So I bought the CD. I still have it. And, you know, I incorporated it into my listening. As I listened to it more and more, I really absorbed those songs and those song structures. And part of the thing that I love about music is structure. When I hear music, a lot of times I'm really focused on what's happening structurally. I think a lot of people listen to music for like pure sound or the emotions it gives them, or, you know, the events that happen in it that make them feel a certain way. And I do that too, but I'm really into structure in terms of literal structure. Like this goes 8 times, this goes 6, this is a bar of 7/4 time, you know, stuff like that. Because I'm a composer and I think that way all the time. So I really started learning these songs because I think they're very catchy, and they have a kind of dissonance and angularity in terms of the chord progressions that I like, that I relate to really strongly, because I always liked dissonance and noise and a lot of tension in music. So I just found the music of this album to be extremely dramatic and powerful and relentless and unusual and iconoclastic. And as time went on, you know, I mean, it's been more than 25 years at this point I've been listening to this album. It just, I'm so familiar with it, and I love every aspect of it so much. I'm still listening to it. You know, I've probably paid for it a few times. I did eventually buy an LP of it when there was a reissue that I found suitably priced.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I still listen to that thing pretty frequently, and it makes me feel good, and it makes me happy, and it reminds me of the power of music and why I play it and why I listen to it. And it fulfills my rock and roll roots, and it also kind of touches my avant-garde side.
Okay.
And I don't know, where do you want to go with this?
Well, I was just curious because I mean, like, so I am not a metal fan really at all. I mean, like, I've listened to some metal over the course of my life, but I've never really been drawn to it. So, and now you even gave me the opportunity to back out of this one, which I said no. I appreciate and I respect.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I respect your knee-jerk reaction to have shot this one out first. And I was just like, okay, that means something. I think that really tells something about the strength of the influence it had on you. So I honored it, and then I started to listen to it, and then I started to research it, and then I was just like, oh, okay, it's this album. I've heard about this album before. I've heard about this band, but I've never listened to them.
Yeah.
So I mean, so for me personally, I don't understand it. I don't understand black metal music. I like, the musicality of it, I understand. And so, you said something similar to the same. And I agree. I agree with you completely. I mean, deeply listening to the music without considering the context of the vocals or even the image of the band. There's some interesting stuff going on there for sure. But then when you sheet that with all of the other things, the context of the costuming of the band, the death-like, morbid face painting, even the attitude that these people have to obviously, seemingly like honestly believe in Satan. They want to wreak havoc. They want to cause just chaos, and they promote evil. And like I don't relate to that.
Yeah, well, I have to say that is the least interesting part of it to me at this point. The controversy around the band Mayhem, particularly around the time when this album was made, which resulted in the burning of churches and the murder of the guitar player by the bass player, which was no laughing matter ultimately. That is part of the myth of the album. I have to say, when I listen to it, I'm not concerned with those aspects of it, and I really take it on a musical level. I'm not a kid, so that kind of like edgy stuff doesn't really do it for me, right? Especially at this point. So there is that whole thing. I do want to say one thing about the vocals, because you brought up the vocals. Now, people who don't like or get death metal, and black metal is a kind of death metal, not vice versa. Like, I would consider black metal to be a subgenre of the big thing called death metal. And part of the point of why the vocals in death metal sound that way is to repulse people who don't relate to it or get it. It's basically to draw a line in the sand saying, we're so ridiculous. Like, if you can't handle these vocals, then you're not welcome to the club. It is a little kind of elitist in a weird way. I do feel like the vocals are there because with a lot of people I know who don't like metal, they always say the same thing. Lydia Lunch said this. Yeah, the music sounds pretty cool, but those vocals, I can't take them. Like, I can't hear them. And that is exactly the point why those vocals are that way. In the case of this album, the guy Attila that did vocals on the album, he wasn't actually in the band at the time. He was Hungarian, and he was in a band called Tormentor that had a demo called Anno Domini that was sort of a seminal death metal demo. And he was brought in because the guitar player Euronymous had a lot of connections to the underground scene, and he was trying to cherry pick a lot of aspects about what Mayhem did so that he could be this sort of elite figure in the underground scene. So Attila was an unusual choice of a singer for this album, and you've heard it, and his vocals are very bizarre. There's sort of almost a rhythmic at time, and he goes into this operatic timbre that is really a mockery of Catholic priests chanting, and stuff like that. It's almost ludicrous. I think the the vocal performance on De Mysteriis Dom Sathanas is very outre. You know, I mean, you might almost laugh when you hear it the first time because you're like, what the hell is this guy doing?
I think I did.
I think that kind of shock and surprise is cool in a way.
Yeah.
It's probably an acquired taste
Mm-hmm.
because it almost seems, maybe, I'm sure to some people it seems like a joke, you know, like why is this is like ridiculous? Like, why is this guy doing this?
Right.
I'm okay with that. You know, I have my own reasons for liking music that may not match up with anyone else's reasons, and that's just how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine any other singer singing on that album. To me, it is, the music is so tightly regimented and like everything fits on a grid in that album. Like everything is very tight and it fits in a certain way. And what I like about Attila's vocals on the album is it's almost like the free jazz element on top. It's almost like a soloist because it's the one thing that's not locked into the grid. And I think that contrast of the tightness of the band and the rigidity of the band structurally, and then having this really crazy vocalist on top it's a perfect combination.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I can appreciate everything that you're saying about it. You know,
Yeah.
I think that with you having clarified for me, and I know I read this somewhere, but I wasn't really thinking about it. But that desire for this band and bands like them in the black metal genre to kind of, you know, deliberately ostracize people and kind of like thin out the herd by being so over the top, like in the dramatics of it, I guess. You know, I mean, but like some of the ways they went about doing it, like, you know, some of the stories that I heard about, like, you know, them actually, like, you know, placing pig heads and boar heads and stuff like that on pikes at shows, which would ultimately end up being tossed around the audience. And of course, you know, the people that are disgusted by that will leave. The people that weren't, well, those are the true fans right there.
So to speak.
Yeah.
You know, after basically right before this album was released, I guess in 1994. Yeah, it must have been 1994. The guy who played bass on the album, Varg Vikernes, who is in a band called Burzum that I don't particularly care for musically or find interesting in the slightest, was in such a competition with the guitar player Euronymous to be the evilest guy in the scene that Varg eventually killed the guitar player Euronymous, and he was dead before the album came out.
Right.
And of course, he went to jail for a whopping
21 years.
5 years.
21. It's maximum.
And yeah, exactly. He was the maximum sentence in Norway. Exactly. So, you know, it's too bad because it would have been very interesting to see where that particular formulation of the band would have gone next. When the band reappeared, it turned into sort of an alumni band, and they went in several different directions. I can't say that I like all of their albums equally after that. Some of them I like a lot, some of them I don't care for at all. They do keep changing. The impetus of the original guitar player is gone, and I think he was the main songwriter, and he had a very distinctive way of writing, and I think that the album was really a perfect statement of his, and it was very overwrought, and they kept working on it until it met Euronymous' high standards of fidelity and mood and all this thing, and it is a very rich recording. I think you know, whether or not you like the content, it's extremely well produced, and that's not, with the black metal genre, that hasn't necessarily been a thing. There was a whole lo-fi ethos with black metal coming from certain sides of the genre. I have to say, by the year 2000, I thought black metal was very old and tired, and that a lot of people came in trying to imitate the form, and they were doing it in very bad, corny ways. So I can't say there's any modern black metal I care about at all. In fact, I think it sucks, most of it. Most of the great black metal records for me were made in the early to mid 90s, and after that there's not a lot really. I frankly I like death metal overall a lot more than black metal. I don't know, the trendiness of black metal when everyone thought it was like really edgy and crazy, that didn't appeal to me at all. Like people focusing on all the crime and the murder and stuff like that in Norway, I just, to me that's just like childish bullshit. Like I don't really care about it. So there is that duality exists, you know, as you've noted. It's part of the myth of the album. But like I said before, when I hear that album, I'm not sitting around like rubbing my hands together thinking about murder and churches burning. It's just powerful. It's like a Wagnerian Sturm und Drang, you know. It's dramatic. It's theatrical, right. You know. I mean, you almost know too much now.
Yeah, well, you know, the funny thing is that like I listened to the record once. So listening to the record is interesting, you know, like I said, I don't mind it musically. I just I find it a little silly. I mean, and like you're saying about the theatrics in general, the theatrics are kind of silly as especially as older men now looking back at it. Yeah.
The thing about it is I heard this record in 1994 and I was a young man. I kind of hated society. I was pretty alienated. I was pretty antisocial. I had a lot of energy. I liked extreme music. I liked saying fuck you to people. And I liked being a cultural elitist, you know? So in a weird way, I was at the right place and time for this stuff to click with me. I guess in some ways it's like no different than punk rock in the late 70s, where it was sort of a nihilist youth movement that was trying to sort of destroy everything that came before it. I mean, it's only as silly as that, honestly, or Jerry Lee Lewis like putting his feet on the piano, or you know, like whatever. I mean, it's all a matter of perspective.
Okay.
At this point, black metal is seen as ludicrous and not scary because it's a bunch of clowns. You know, I get it. And it's really easy to be like, oh, black metal, it's silly. Well, it was made silly. I think, you know, if it was 1994, you might not be calling it silly because there was sort of a different vibe going on there.
Yeah.
I don't think you would have liked it either, frankly, from what you're saying. No, I mean, it doesn't appeal to you, and that kind of nihilism doesn't appeal to you. I guess, yeah. I mean, I just think black metal as a whole is seen as a fucking joke at this point because it kind of is. So it doesn't offend me to hear that. I think it's a joke. I mean, but the thing is, when you come down to it and you strip away all of the mythos around this Mayhem album, you know, for me, it's a perfect rock and roll album. So, you know, I'm not really that interested in the crime around it. It's kind of, you know, it's kind of beside the point to me at this point.
Right. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get into the album a little bit.
Let's.
Transylvania. Yeah.
It's such an assault, and it's such a masterful, like structurally, it's so great. They open up with the catchiest riff on the album. And when the track was recorded, there's actually a drum fill that goes before that sounds like. So they decided at the last minute to cut off this opening drum fill that they always played live. So it almost sounds like when the music starts, it's starting in progress, which I think is a really powerful way to open an album, where it seems like it's already just like full steam ahead from the first second. But then it ratchets up more. You know, it just keeps going further and further. So it goes through this tight set of sequences at the beginning, and then it chokes, you know, stops on a choke, and then this weird guy comes in on vocals. It's a bit bizarre, you know, I'll admit it. You know, when I have to say, like, the first time you heard this, I wouldn't blame you if you're laughing, because you're probably just like, what the hell is going on? You know?
Yeah, Gollum just walked in the room.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of hilarious. I mean, but to me, you know, that's the sign of good art. If you can find profundity in it, but you can also just like laugh at it too, just because out of joy or whatever, even just because you think it's ludicrous, you know, like I'm open to that. I mean, there are things that I like in music that I think are hilarious, you know, maybe at the expense of the artist. Even in this case, I don't think I feel that way about it, but I can see why people would, you know, it's not that shocking.
Right. All right. So let's get into the song a little bit. So from my research, I found a quote from the lead singer, the former lead singer who committed suicide before this album was released, who went by the name Dead. So Death is obviously a focal point of the majority of the Mayhem catalog lyrically. So Dead wrote, "It's so thin and so beautiful, but also so dark and mysterious." Those are some of the words from the song. So what are your thoughts about death, and are you afraid of it?
My thoughts about death. I haven't been afraid of death in a long time. I think when I was a kid, like most kids, you get to a point where you have heard and thought about death, and it seems very scary, because what if you die? You haven't even done anything with your life yet. I think that is a natural position that any really young person would have. I haven't been scared of death in a long time because I tried to live as much as I could, maybe too much sometimes. And I know it's inevitable, and I know it's not something I'm necessarily looking forward to, but I don't think you necessarily get to choose when you die, unless you take your own life, and you might even fail at that.
Right.
So it's tricky. I'm not going to act like I'm a real tough guy that has no fear of death whatsoever, because that would be a lie. But I do think that really living is more important than dwelling on death.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I've had friends die. People in my life have died.
Mm-hmm.
It's not great when it happens.
No,
Yeah, I'm not a death worshiper. I think going back to the whole idea of these lyrics as metaphors, there were situations around the band where the metaphor became real. Like you talked about their early singer Dead, who probably wrote half this album with them, but he killed himself before they even started recording it.
right.
Mental illness comes into play here.
Oh yeah.
You know, I think, and mental illness is a serious thing, and I think a lot of mental illness is not addressed in people, and this is a crisis of civilization, you know.
Right.
Especially in America, a lot of people who are mentally ill, they have not much recourse for therapy or medical help. So you have a lot of crazy fucking people in America. And apparently in Norway, at that point, you had a lot too.
Yeah.
Norway is apparently a very together country as far as their mental health. So I think all these crimes that happened with the black metal scene were very shocking to the Norwegians, because they couldn't fathom that this was a movement.
Right.
You know, it was almost seen as a terrorist movement. It was seen as a terrorist movement.
Yeah. And it's by the young people of this community, you know, which is even more terrifying. It's just like the children are revolting against us, you know, and in these horrifying ways, like burning down churches and murdering people randomly.
Yeah, I don't think some of these people were in their right mind. I think they were mentally ill, and I don't salute them for having mental illness and acting on it.
Right.
But at the same time, this is a reflection of parts of reality that maybe I can relate to, and maybe some people don't want to relate to. And I understand that. Like my mom doesn't want to listen to this Mayhem album.
Oh, I bet not.
She doesn't want to, she doesn't want to vibe on what's going on in these lyrics and in the message and the history of the band. I get that. I guess I've always been a nihilist.
Mm-hmm.
So the nihilism, whether mostly poetically with Mayhem, strikes a chord with me.
Great. Well, that's that thing that's good there. I want to move on to the next song, which is Freezing Moon.
Please do. Yes, it is. Here comes the chain.
Coming out.
One of the chain.
Mm-hmm. I do like that riff. I gotta say that doon 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 and that kind of slide down.
Yeah, that kind of sliding guitar business is sort of a distinctive part of the playing on the whole album. It's sleazy or something. I mean, Mayhem's a rock and roll band. Lest we not forget, they're kind of a classic rock band in a weird way. I mean, these guys grew up listening to heavy metal. They're into Motorhead,
Black
stuff
Sabbath,
like that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Celtic Frost, I believe,
so
was another band.
Yeah, but ultimately Mayhem is a rock and roll band. As far as Freezing Moon goes, that was kind of a classic composition that they had kicking around for years before they recorded it. And there's different versions of it. There was a compilation, I think in 1991, called Projections of a Stained Mind that had a version of that song with Dead, the singer, on it, the guy who killed himself.
Oh, okay.
Obviously it's very repetitive, the selection you played.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the repetition in their music is ritualistic or ceremonial when they use it, because Freezing Moon has all these series of tempo changes. We didn't even get to the sort of part where it kicks into the main song.
Right.
I think it's almost like the beginning part is a processional, and then it kicks in, and then the blast beats start again. And I have to say, I love the drums. The drumming on this album is just perfect to me. Hellhammer, he got more and more technical as the bands progressed, to the point where it's almost ridiculous. But I feel like on this album, it's just such great rock drumming. Everything about it it's so showy and perfect. And, he's like a machine gun on this album. There's just something so great about how the drums are recorded.
Yeah.
They sound so warm and big. And
so I was looking for a quote about the recording of the drums, specifically because I know that you are a drummer as well, and obviously you like the way that this was recorded. So I found a piece from a Rolling Stone article that was written on them. So in the sessions that span 92 through 93, the band, consisting of Euronymous, Vikernes, and Hellhammer, converged on Grieg Hall. Is that how you pronounce that?
Grieg Holland, yeah.
Grieg Hall, home to Bergen, Norway's Philharmonic Orchestra, to record. The studio was located a few floors up in the building, but it had a low ceiling, and Hellhammer thought it muted his sound. Then he went into the main hall where a 5-piece drum kit was set up and loved the sound there. This is a quote, I says to engineer Peyton, I want my drums down there, says Hellhammer, who recalls being a big jazz fan at the time, inspired by Buddy Rich. And he goes, ha, you're crazy. Yes, I am. And then he understood. We took the cable for the microphones and ran them down the elevator shaft. They set up some candles down there and dimmed the lights, and subsequently, De Mysteriis Dom Sathanas had one of the most powerful drum sounds in metal. There you go.
I would say so.
Yeah, No, it's great. I do like the drums in this on this record. You know, that's definitely something that stood out to me. So Freezing Moon,
You know,
I have a question about the song.
I have to say before we move on,
Sure.
there are instrumental rough mixes of this album. Just saying.
Oh, really? I don't think I could afford them.
Oh yeah, they exist. Yeah, I can hook you up, bro.
Oh, really?
You can put your own. You can do karaoke, Mayhem karaoke on top.
Oh, wow. That would be a challenge. We can try that. After everything opens back
I
up,
would do that.
there's the boombox downtown in Providence, Rhode Island.
Yeah,
I'll do my best Gollum impression that I can. My precious, my
excellent.
ring. So this song, okay. I already told you about the drums. Mayhem drummer John Axel Hellhammer Blomberg claimed that the lyrics of the song Freezing Moon are meant to make people commit suicide.
Woohoo!
I didn't get that at all.
Sounds like Marilyn Manson, bro.
I didn't get that looking through the lyrics. As a matter of fact, looking through the lyrics for me, it made me wonder if this song was about a werewolf.
Hey,
You know,
maybe more metaphors.
yeah. Well, I mean, considering all the darkness, all the kind of like macabre, you know, theatrics that they go through, all the talk about death and stuff, it kind of sounds like he's singing about like a werewolf. Like, let me see, where are some samples of lyrics? It's night again, night you beautiful. I please my hunger on living humans. Night of hunger, follow its call, follow the freezing moon. That's one verse.
It's got a strong Halloween vibe.
For sure.
But the whole album does.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, this is definitely a Halloween album.
Spooky.
Uh-huh. All right, well, so that's pretty much all I've got for Freezing Moon. Let's move on to Cursed in Eternity.
Oh, yeah. I love this change when it goes to the fast part. It blows my mind.
Nice. That was good. That was a good drum break.
Feel like making yeah, that was a good drum break.
It was.
You know, I have to say something. I wonder with blast beat drumming,
mm-hmm.
You know, when I first started listening to this music, the beat would kind of flip flop and I would hear the snare as the downbeat. You know, it's because it's sort of these alternating between the kick and the snare.
Uh-huh.
And if you're not used to where the one of the beat is, it's almost like it flips over and the syncopation becomes the downbeat. And I think that's a confusing thing, maybe for people who aren't used to this music. They don't hear the downbeat and it can be just even more disorienting, or maybe that's even more of like the code of the music.
Yeah.
Where it's almost like you have to have experience listening to the music to really hear it, or something like that, I guess.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, I can see what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't given this enough of a listen to know for sure, or to be able to speak to that really.
Yeah.
But I can see what you mean. For sure.
Well, you know, I saw them in the last few years when they were touring, playing this album.
Oh yeah.
I went to 2 shows on the De Mysteriis Dom Sathanas tour. I guess it was a few years ago. And the sound was awful. I think their sound guy was doing too much speed or something, and he was really out of it. So I'm going to these shows to hear these songs that I love so much, and it just sounds like kind of a wall of crap, unfortunately. But the only reason why I knew what was going on is that I know these songs so well that I could totally tell where they were, even though like it was a bit hard to hear what was going on.
Yeah.
That wasn't I didn't feel like I got my money's worth in that regard. The band did play very well, but I feel like the sound guy screwed up their sound
That
for
sucks.
whatever reason. It just sounded like a bunch of mush. But they're really into clarity. You know, I mean, some of their albums are almost anal in their clarity. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think this was just a foible. I should have done sound for him instead, man.
And where were these shows happening?
Let's see. I saw them in Chicago and New York.
Oh, okay. And like, what kind of venues were these?
They were, the New York one was at St. Vitus, which is a pretty small rock bar, and it was sold out. And I think maybe the capacity must have been 200, 250 or something. So people were really crammed in there.
Oh, wow.
And I was right in front.
Yeah.
I don't mess around. I'm not there to like vibe on the rest of the audience. I don't like people, so I don't want to be in a room full of people. Like, so I'm trying to like exclude them from my from my enjoyment of the music by being like close to the front.
Yeah.
And then the other one I guess I saw in Chicago, and that was, I drove the bass player Necro Butcher around that day because he had put out a photo book of old vintage Mayhem photos, and Thurston Moore printed that. So Thurston called me, and I guess I was like the go-to guy to drive Necro Butcher around. He said, "Hey, Weez, you want to come to Chicago and drive around Necro Butcher?" And I said, "Yes, I absolutely would." So Thurston flew me to Chicago. I saw my family, and then I spent the whole day driving Necro Butcher around, you know, laughing it up, listening to metal. And I went to the concert that night. I think that was at a bigger venue. I think it was at the Cabaret Metro, which is more like 800, 1,000 people. And it was packed, and it was a big show.
Oh, okay.
I might be wrong about the venue. My short-term memory stinks like these days because hard living.
Mm-hmm.
But I've brain damage from being awesome. But I think it was at the Metro. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But it was in Chicago, and it was at a bigger venue. And the sound was kind of stinky, but whatever.
Yeah,
happened.
I was kind of curious just because like I was like I know that they're kind of a massive band at this point. I mean, like black metal in general is a huge genre of music, and it's hugely popular. That's fair to say, right?
Yeah, but I would say as far they're a big band around the world. I mean, they've played everywhere in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And but I would also say that they are very rogue as far as black metal goes. They really have never adhered to the cliches of black metal for too long. They set the cliche, but then they moved the hell away from it very quickly. A lot of black metal bands are very tiresome to me because they are just regurgitating the norms of the idiom, and I find that extremely tedious since bands that preceded them did it much better. So there's no reason to listen to their inferior versions of weak versions of black metal. But Mayhem has always been rather innovative. They made an album in the late 90s called Ordo Ad Chaos that is extremely avant-garde. It's like modern classical music in terms of structure. It's one of the most dissonant, asymmetrical, rigid, alienated albums I've ever heard. And it's really incredible. And it almost has nothing to do with black metal as we know it. It's more like almost like modern classical composition or something. I mean, they have tricks up their sleeves. They're not like cliched black metal clown makeup clowns, you know. There's something a little more profound going on up there.
Yeah, well, that's what I do understand and respect about all types of metal that I've heard in the past. Is just that is the musicality of the people that make it, you know, because you know, I think that the unsophisticated or the unwilling to challenge themselves with metal, the style of music, don't necessarily hear nuances in the music. They just hear the blast beats, they just hear the chaos and the you know, distorted guitars and stuff like that. They don't hear what's happening with those guitars, like some of the harmonics that they do with each other, some of even the riffs, and like how pleasant they actually are, like in the background. Like if you took the distortion off of some of those parts, like how melodious they would be.
Right. So
I give it credit. I totally give it credit.
But that's just, I mean, that's just the nature of any extreme music, whether you're talking about free jazz or modern classical or noise or heavy metal. Um, when we hear dense, extreme music or sound, part of what we naturally do is try to decode it. And if we can't decode it, I feel like our brains kind of shut off at that point.
Mhm.
And hearing this and just hearing noise and not hearing the chord progressions. I mean, I feel that way. I've been listening to death metal forever, and still when I hear a lot of death metal, that's how it registers to me. It's just like a bunch of freaking noise,
Yeah.
because until you decode it, it's just, there's so much going on.
Sure.
I think a lot of people like to be able to relate more directly to music. They don't want to have to work at decoding it.
Right.
And that makes total sense.
Right.
I think in the case of death metal, before I really understood what was going on, it did hit me in a very visceral manner, and it just sounded like cool noise,
Mhm. Okay.
And then I went further with it.
All right. So,
Yeah.
so the song "Cursed in Eternity" makes me wonder: are you a superstitious person?
No.
Okay. Do you feel like there has ever been a moment you might have been cursed?
No, not per se. I mean, I would say that I did and said a lot of things as a young man that made a lot of social doors close for me. I think that's cause and effect about being a jerk when I probably shouldn't have, because I didn't know any better.
Okay.
Because I was trying to be me or whatever I thought I was doing. Sometimes we learn things the hard way.
Hmm.
No, I'm not very metaphysical. No.
Okay. Cool. So let's.
Yeah, I have used the title "Cursed in Eternity" on some of my music. I have an album called Curses,
Oh.
actually, and it's and one of the long tracks is called "Cursed in Eternity." So it's funny you should ask me if I believe in curses, because I don't, but still I have an album called Curses, and it's coming from the same thing. This what I was going to say, and I'll try to make it a little less long of tooth. I have used the title "Cursed in Eternity" for one of my records, for a long piece on a record I made called Curses. So in the case of my album Curses, which is a really abstract, weird album, it's using the idea of a curse as more of a metaphor or a soliloquy to set a mood rather than being a literal curse. I think some of these terms are really loaded, and that's why they use them, especially in extreme metal. I mean, it almost seems like a lot of the song titles are interchangeable or something, like you pick about 10 words, spooky words, and then you just kind of mix them all up, so it's a lexicon, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your "Cursed in Eternity" is not a cover of Mayhem?
Not at all. It's just another one of my many homages to Mayhem.
Okay.
Winks.
Cool.
Because a lot of people that listen to my music, they don't know that's a Mayhem title. It's they have no clue. So whatever.
They do now. We're letting them in.
Yeah, they do now if they're listening to this, which
listening.
People like to listen to me talk. I don't know. I try to be funny, I guess, or something.
You're a very interesting dude. I gotta admit, I was a little anxious of speaking with you. I was a little afraid. I was just like, he's a little intimidating, this guy. And I know that's not the first time you've ever heard that.
Some people think I am harsh. Some people think I can be a gadfly. I have a reputation, but honestly, I try to treat people at face value and try to come to people with respect first. I can be a jerk if I'm pushed in that direction or annoyed thusly that I have to react that way. But this is, once again, we're talking about persona versus the real person. I mean, I guess on stage a lot of times I seem like a very imperious, jacked up guy, which on stage I am, but I like kittens and puppies and all that good stuff,
Yeah. Okay.
But I also love to hail Satan for fun, just to get a vibe going.
No, I relate to what you were saying because it was actually something that I mentioned to one of my previous guests, Brandon. We were talking about, kind of like being a jerk, and like, back in my day, I was kind of an ass. I had my moments of being an asshole too, but basically my attitude is that I am a mirror to people. So when people come at
Yeah,
me with some like really shitty attitudes, I'm just shitty right back to them. And I just think that that's
sure.
fun at that point. But for the
Can
most
be.
part, I'm just,
Yeah. I think
go ahead.
that's especially a young person thing when you have too much energy, maybe a male thing.
Hmm.
Um, I just feel like when I was a young man, I felt I had a lot to prove. And I felt like some of my idols were these no bullshit iconoclasts. So I was influenced by them thinking, well, if they can do this, I can do this. Like, I'm going to take a stand for what I believe in. Hindsight is 2020. I see how that may not have been always constructive, but here I am.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're gonna move on to the next song,
Yeah.
which
Pagan
is
fears.
Pagan Fears. Lyrics. All right. First thing I want to mention is that right there that we were listening to, that part, do you think that that sounds like Sailing On by Bad Brains?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not crazy.
Yeah. Sort of. Well, it's the same chord progression. That's for sure. I never thought about
It
it
is.
that way, but it's the exact same interval at least. I don't know if it's in the same key. It could be actually. Wow. I have a pretty good tonal memory for key centers. I have
Okay.
what you would call good relative pitch. I don't have perfect pitch where someone can sing a note and I can just tell you what note it is. But I
Right.
have certain pitches memorized, like the low open E on a guitar. I have that memorized. I can recognize that.
Oh, okay. Well, let's try it.
I-
You ready? Here's Sailing On by Bad Brains.
We don't want it anymore. I walked right out the door. I think it's the same chords. Absolutely. That's funny. I never noticed that.
Hey,
I think it's
it
literally
just
the same
happened.
chord progression. That's funny. Good call.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. It just jumped out at me, just like immediately,
Yeah.
like I
That's
heard, and it
funny.
was like,
Well, I think those guys, I'm, yeah, a lot of the chord progressions and the Mayhem stuff on this album are very elemental. They're almost things that have been used a million times, recontextualized in this powerful way. It's almost like maybe that's why it's so it hits me so hard, is because a lot of the chord progressions they're things you have kind of heard a million times. Maybe like
mhm.
I don't know, there's like a familiarity to it that's there the first time you hear it or something. I mean, it's
Yeah.
ingenious. It's like it's very simple music in a lot of ways. Very complex things about
Yeah.
it, like the drumming and maybe some of the structure. But I think the idea was to make a lot of the riffs really memorable by making them very simple and have this very specific kind of gravity to them. So
Yeah. No, so when
yeah,
you're writing a song, though, do you feel like there are
yeah,
certain chords that kind of go hand in hand and that you kind of gravitate towards?
I do. When I write music, I do hear it. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
sometimes when I'm writing something, I can hear that I want it to lead to something else, and there is a sort of that's an aesthetic thing. It's very subjective, of course, but I have always tried to pick lesser used paths for my own music, just because there's so much music, and especially so much music based on like bar chords, you know, and movements of bar chords, that it's a little tough to want to write the same song that somebody's already written 100 times. So that's where in my own writing, I would generally, rarely do I write anything that's straight bar chords, because just that's been milked to absolute death. I actually add some other tones to it, or add something contrasting on the top. So, but on the bottom, I think there is a melodic function of this kind of movement of chords. And yeah, I think I tend to hear those things, and I know where I want them to go and how I want them to lead. Yeah, sure.
Okay, cool.
Some things are just undeniable. Like sometimes using the simplest thing does make sense, but then it's what you do around it that makes it not just another, you know, punk chord progression you've heard a million times. And I think that's the key to music in general. A mix of the familiar with new contexts or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. So this song, Pagan Fears, Dead, the lyricist, said Pagan Fears was about the idea that the past isn't dying but remains in some fated reality.
Ooh.
Yeah.
There's a lot of nihilism in the lyrics. I mean, the guy did kill himself. He was a dark guy.
I mean, as strange as it sounds, he seems to have been the most not passionate, but sincere in his words and his choices. Like he lived by what he preached, you know. And I think that the next song actually is probably the perfect example of that. So maybe we should just get into that song.
Let's do it.
Life Eternal.
Yup.
That bass line, that's so good. Very, very melodic.
Once again, there's a lot of gravity to the chord progressions, and I think that's part of what makes this album.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a great song, I think. You know, as far as like what's going on there melodically. So Life Eternal. We were speaking earlier with Pagan Fears about how the singer Dead kind of truly lives his lives what he preaches. It was believed that he possibly suffered from Cotard syndrome. Do you know what that is?
No, what is that?
So people with Cotard syndrome, also called walking corpse syndrome or Cotard's delusion, believe that parts of their body are missing, or that they are dying, dead, or don't exist.
Wow.
They may think nothing exists. Cotard syndrome is rare, with about 200 known cases worldwide.
Hey, maybe. We can't ask him now, but he was a troubled guy.
So one of the reasons why I was saying to you earlier that I was a little intimidated about speaking to you is that I know that you're a very astute researcher of music, and and I'm not really. I only do this research for the show based on what people tell me, like what they want to listen to. So I don't have too much time to do a lot of research, but I did hear about this, and what I found out about this guy Dead was that he was actually at a young age, which I can't remember which age he was beaten like near death, and he actually did like I guess he did flatline for a period of time, so he technically did die for a little while and was revived. Like he was beaten to the point
Yeah.
where he they ruptured his spleen. So people that knew him closely and personally said that he was never the same after that, and that's where they feel like this
Yeah.
syndrome may have possibly kicked in.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
That makes sense. You know, yeah, sure. I mean, sometimes there are very basic explanations for all kinds of things, but we find those explanations out when it's too late to do anything about it.
Yeah, no, of
That's
course.
life, you know.
Right. So
Yeah, well, he was, you know, he wasn't a happy camper. He was disturbed for sure, and it's not particularly fun or cool, especially if you're his friend or valued what he did. But you know, that's how it happened.
right. Unless of
So,
course you're like his bandmate Euronymous, who ended up finding his dead body, and what does he do? But he goes back out, leaves the house to go find a disposable camera to take photographs of it.
yes, and it actually appeared on the cover of a bootleg album called Dawn of the Black Hearts, and
Yeah.
it's pretty gruesome. You know, it's
Yeah.
what it sounds like.
Yeah, I looked it up. It wasn't worth it. I shouldn't have.
Yeah, it's not pretty, and you know, but once again, it goes back to the idea that these guys were trying to seem like they were the most extreme. So, you know, it's hard to say if mental illness was involved. It probably was. They weren't the standard bearers for Norwegian society.
Right. There I have some excerpts from his suicide note here.
Hmm.
So the famous line was excuse all the blood, because the way he killed himself was actually he slit his wrists and his neck, and then when that wasn't seeming to work enough, he shot himself with a shotgun to the head.
Yep.
Um, so it says that it was the intention that I would die in the woods so that it would take a few days before I was possibly found. I belong in the woods and have always done so. No one will understand the reason for this anyway. To give some semblance or of an explanation, I'm not a human. This is just a dream, and soon I will awake. Much like the lyrics in this song.
Right.
Um, as a last salutation, may I present life eternal, which he left the lyrics to this song. Do
Yeah.
whatever you want with the fucking thing. Signed, Pell. Is that how you pronounce his name? Pelle.
Pelle. Yeah.
Yeah, Pelle.
He was Swedish. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he
So
was. Yeah.
Go ahead.
He was a bit of an outsider, also by the sense that the rest of the band was Norwegian and he was Swedish, and he would travel rather infrequently to meet up with them and play with them. I'm not sure the band had the strongest. I don't think they knew him that well. You know, it was sort of. I think at that point, Dead was in a band called Morbid before that, which had sort of famous demos out that people liked that were a bit more heavy metalish than what Mayhem was doing. But once again, this was Euronymous sort of cultivating his band and trying to have the cream of the crop of these underground people in his band. So he invited Dead to be in the band, and Dead would commute from Sweden to hang with those guys and do their rehearsals and stuff.
Okay. So based on the song
Yeah.
and some of this information that I've shared with you, what do you hope will be the long-term significance of your body of work?
Mine? I'm not counting on it. And I think at one point, I think I desired that my music and art would make some kind of concrete impact. And now I know that there's a lot of art and it affects those who like it or appreciate it or who come in contact with it and are affected by it.
Mm-hmm.
The artist doesn't necessarily know how anyone is affected by their art. Sometimes they show up and they clap for it. Other times you have no clue who's experiencing your art and what they think about it and how it impacts you. So I let go of that a long time ago. I don't necessarily get that much feedback from my art a lot of the time. And if I did it for that feedback, I would have probably quit a long time ago.
Right.
A lot of times I make stuff. Yeah, a lot of times I just make stuff, I put it out there and kind of shrug my shoulders and move on to the next thing, you know?
Right. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I've only asked the question based on like how much of a discography I know that you already have. I mean, it's
Yeah.
pretty astounding, really, for a person of your age to have that much work behind them is staggering, really. So,
Well, thanks.
yeah, no, I mean, like,
I
and
see
I
it.
know that.
Go ahead.
Oh, I know that, like, I've heard you speak about it, and so that's kind of why I was thinking, like, based on how much there is, how much you must
Yeah.
think of it, because obviously you helped create it to some degree, whether it was, whether it was just a performer on a record or if you created that band and wrote those songs.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I was wondering, like, if there must be some desire for it to kind of leave like a legacy of some sort. I know, man, I try to avoid that word at this point, but
Yeah,
I think you know what I mean.
I do. Well, I think you've touched on some pretty relevant points. I think the point of my body of work is to just say, I always thought there was right and wrong ways to do art and music, and it's so subjective. I always felt like if you don't like everyone else's music, you should make your own and make it exactly how you think it should be made. And that's all I really did. Obviously, I love music. I have a lot of influences, and in some ways, I'm a bit eclectic. But all I did was just synthesize all my influences and everything I like and try to do my own version of it and be part of the continuum. So if I'm part of that, great. Like some people like my stuff. That's cool. That doesn't make me complacent. I feel like it's a
Yeah.
gift to be able to do this in a weird way. Not everyone can do this, so I try to take advantage of that and really do the best I can with what resources I have and try to keep the bar really high, because I think it's a privilege that anyone would pay attention to my music because there's so much of it.
Right.
Like, I'm glad if someone thinks there's something about my music that makes it stand out enough that they want to check it out. I don't want to disappoint those people. And I know that the only way not to disappoint them is to keep my own criticism of my music and my standards as high as it's always been. So, that's my mission. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to the next song, From the Dark Past.
Oh boy. Fun song. With all these compositions, there's always a big ending. It's almost like if you just play the first part, it's like telling a joke without giving them a punchline. And I know you can't play the songs all the way through. I mean, that's so obvious, but I just think, if anyone's listening to this and they've never heard it before, they're probably like, okay, like, all right, there's these riffs, but there really are, these compositions do have a punchline, and there's some drama, and there's some, they're like scaffolding, they have these levels of activity that sometimes have very exciting climaxes. So I'm just
That's a
saying
very
that. Yeah.
very
You
good
know,
point to make, and that's very true. I
yeah.
completely understand what you mean, because I know, I know some of these songs. Like I know, well, I listened to all of it, but I'm just saying, like you're absolutely right. And 30 seconds of one of these songs isn't going to do it justice.
Yeah. It's kind of like the beginnings of a lot of the songs are the setup for the beat down, that comes later.
Right. All
you
right. Well,
know.
well, maybe we can. Maybe by the time we get to the last song, we can listen to the whole thing. When I first started this show, I used to listen to the entire record and just speak over it.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
just started to avoid doing that, only because I felt like, speaking wise, it's just easier to hear us when we're not talking over music.
Totally. Yeah, I can see why that would be very distracting to a point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
on YouTube, it sucks because then I couldn't use the discussion, because whatever we would say over the music, I'd have to cut the music out because you can't play it on
Yep.
YouTube.
Yep.
So
Um, you know, Buried by Time and Dust, the next track, that is the most succinct track on the album, and it's the craziest one in terms of speed, because it starts out really fast and then it goes really faster and then it goes really fast and just stays there for the rest of the song. And I think it's it's a superhuman performance by Hellhammer on drums. I've actually
mm,
played that song. My old death metal band Hatewave used to play that song in the 90s, and I always was like, we have to do it as fast as the Mayhem song. It can't be slower or it's weak. So I've
mm.
had to play that before, and it's it's something else.
It's a workout, huh? All
Yo,
right. Well,
funny stuff.
so before we get there, from the dark past, the only thing I have about this song is actually a couple of quotes from people who commented on the songmeanings.com website.
Mm,
So one person wrote, the song is about how deceased ones only know the true history that they lived in.
okay,
Um,
sure, why not?
Another
But they
person
can't tell us
quoted,
anything, can they?
no, right, exactly. That's why they're the only one that knows the true history, I suppose. The
Oh,
next person quoted, yeah, okay, this band is simply incredible. I just found them and I think it probably doesn't need to be said, but regardless, this is less about lyrics and more about the unspeakable power that is behind it. What what is there? Completely chaotic, bursts of intelligent reflection upon the ridiculous, pathetic bleakness of our race. This is not just music, it is a gateway to something much darker, more complex, and far wiser. Um, with this being said, what have been some of the most ridiculous shit you've heard from fans?
oh, hmm. I think I'm more affected by people's misunderstandings of my music than any compliments. I think in
Yep.
terms of my music, sometimes people assume the motivations behind it or the reasons for doing it, and they're just flat out wrong. I know, because I know why I made this stuff. So
Right.
sometimes that's kind of a bummer to me when people think my motivation was such and such, and it really wasn't. It was something completely different,
Hmm.
like especially playing extreme music. Some people think you're just doing it to just be like an edge lord or be crazy, or you don't really like this stuff, like nobody actually listens to this stuff. That's not for anyone to tell me why I do what I do. I mean, it's like ridiculous. I've done some
Right.
pretty unlistenable music, but it's not when I say unlistenable, I mean that that is the intent, that is the design, is that it's not supposed to be easily listenable. Sometimes I make music as it's almost like a piece of visual art, like it's an abstraction that can be taken or leaving. It can be taken or leaving. It can be took or left at face value.
Right. But so you've never heard some thing that just kind of like caught you off guard from a fan, or
Sometimes people do get my intentions right, and I'm glad when they do. Uh,
okay.
I can't think of anything offhand because I don't really rest on my laurels. Uh, like if someone compliments me and likes my stuff, I'm glad, but that's not really like a stopping point for me. Um, I just keep going and going. So I don't know.
Right. Okay.
Doesn't go to my
All right. Well,
head.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you were speaking highly of the next song, Buried by Time and Dust. So let's get into that one a little bit. Let's see how fast it can get.
Let's.
So I'm imagining it just stays right around there for the remainder of the 30 seconds.
It does. It's kind of more impressive in context because there really is this point where it starts out fast, kind of kick it into overdrive, and then finally they kick it into overdrive again, and these sort of like tiers of speed are really funny. I just find it's black humor to me, like the structural elements of this music. It makes me laugh when I hear it because it's just like, just when you think they can't go any faster, they like come even faster than the whole rest of the album, basically. So it's really funny. I mean, Hellhammer is an insanely technical drummer, and the stuff that he would play on the later albums makes this stuff sound slow. So it's all relative, you know.
Yeah, weird. Well, I mean, it works really great. I mean, it's a great, powerful, fast song. I can only imagine how the crowd might convulse when the song is played, and almost to the point of possibly breaking.
The crowds are really boring, frankly. I don't understand what has happened to music crowds. They seem to stand there with their arms folded, and I don't understand this. It's not like going to a Slayer concert in the 80s. It's like a bunch of people with their arms folded standing still, and I don't relate to it. I'm a headbanger if I am inspired to do such, and I prefer to only see bands that would make me headbang. So I'm pretty active, but I must look like a freak as a result, because I think audiences are mostly pretty boring for this kind of stuff, and I don't understand it personally. You know, why are they there? No idea.
Yeah, it is a growing trend, isn't it? I mean, this is something else that got brought up on a previous episode, where is this like, is this our age kind of catching up to us, or is it just that people are just more unenthusiastic about exciting music?
Hard to say, but I would bet the latter has something to do with it, and it's sad because I'm 48 years old, and music still deeply moves me and inspires me. And I feel like if I'm, let's call it dancing, like if I'm headbanging or moving or something to music, it's because it's really inspiring me, but also I feel like I want to give something back to the band, like give an offering of energy back to them, and that's one way I can do it as an audience member. So it's like encouraging them. They're putting out so much energy. Why would you not want to give that back and make it a big system of energy exploding? I don't understand. It's very pathetic, but that's how it is.
Right. So about this song, it seems like it's a pretty cut and dry depiction of a vampire, possibly Vlad the Impaler. What's your favorite vampire movie?
Blood, or the Andy Warhol's Dracula. It's hilarious. Cracks me up. Have you seen it?
No, I don't think.
Have you seen it? Blood for Dracula. Oh my God, it is so ridiculous. Well, it's Andy Warhol only has stuff to do with it by name. I mean, it's like Andy Warhol's Dracula. He has nothing to do with it other than that. It was directed by a guy named Paul Morrissey that I guess was working for Warhol. But Blood for Dracula stars Udo Kier, the actor, as Dracula, and he is so over the top, is so ridiculous. It's like it's like if Tim and Eric made Dracula, you'd have blood for Dracula, like or something like that. It's not that out, but it's pretty campy and it's pretty ridiculous and dirty and bizarre. I don't know. That's absolutely my favorite one, of course. Love it. There's a Frankenstein one too. That's amazing. That was in 3D actually.
Oh, wow. Also Andy
Yeah,
Warhol.
it's called Flesh for Frankenstein. That one, I actually like that one better. That one is one of my favorite movies of all time. It is so bizarre. It's a classic. Yeah.
I'll have to look into it at some point.
Please do.
Sure will. It's more funny than horror, you're saying. So, I'm not a big horror fan, but I do like, one occasionally.
Hey man, look at it the same way as you look at the Mayhem album, like it's,
right.
It's a horror movie, but it's also preposterous. You can kind of laugh at it because it's so over the top and ridiculous that it becomes kind of funny. I mean, I would be lying if I didn't think Mayhem's music was preposterous. Of course it's preposterous. It's ludicrous. It's so over the top. It's ridiculous. Of course it's kind of funny, but I'm not actually, it's like laughing at it, laughing with it, whatever. You know what I mean? If it makes you feel good and you relate to it, who cares? You don't have to overanalyze it, I mean,
right.
I definitely think this album is funny and hilarious because it's so extreme. But I also take it very seriously and it's very moving to me too. So as art, it works on so many different levels. I think it's rich in that way,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. I will do it.
Cool.
All right. So we were moving on to the final track of the album, which happens to be the title track.
I really think this is an incredible way to end the album. It's so bizarre and emotional and epic, and it gets very strange towards the end when Attila the singer is sort of mocking the vocals of Catholic priests. It's like this blasphemic mockery, and when most people hear that, they're just like, what the hell is going on? And I just think it's a really incredible, bold choice, because Dead wouldn't have done that. Dead would have just, screamed and shrieked. But Attila, that guy, he's a weirdo, man. He took the chance, and I think his performance on this song is incredible. It's an incredible way to end the album.
Okay, let's give it a shot. So I'm just going to bring that out a little bit. You can still hear it, right?
Yeah.
There you go. This way we can hear a little bit of what you're talking about.
It's easy to see this music the same way you see a horror movie. It's kind of good, clean fun on some levels. Spooky, scary.
Right. It's all for but so that's what I was saying about like my initial question to you at the very beginning about how do you take this, because I think that there are some people that maybe take this a little too literally, and they kind of dig into that whole aesthetic of the Satanism and all of this weird cult sacrificial stuff that it speaks of.
Oh yeah.
And that's what turns me off about the genre in general. I mean, it's not the music so much as are these people being brainwashed type thing,
Yeah. Well, as a person who I don't feel like I have to like or respect the maker of the art to get something from the art. I am not moralistic in this regard necessarily. I even like some art by people who screwed me over. So I guess that's a privilege to be in that position where I can kind of let some things fly that I don't agree with and still dig the groovy music. Not everyone feels that way, and I get it. Music is representative, so if you don't want to be represented by somebody, I get it. You want to disassociate yourself from it. So, I mean, I'm sure just somebody who, maybe like Dead's relatives probably never want to hear this music ever again, because it reminds them of his death. I get it. I mean, it's all very relative. I don't know. I don't expect people or artists to be good people at all. I think it's, the internet kind of is weird because people wind up knowing too much about certain artists, and then all of a sudden there's a like ban or boycott or something like that, and I think it's too bad for them. I mean, it's goes into this sort of like virtue signaling realm. I'm glad if people stand for something and they have opinions about stuff. So be it.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like that cancel culture thing you're talking about, right? I mean, if this band
I don't want
album,
to come off like I'm one of these grumpy old guys who's terrified about cancel culture. Whatever. It's a trend in society. I've always tried to keep my nose clean and have ethics, so I'm not really that threatened by it.
Right.
But you never know. You never
But
know.
do you think that if this band had released this album today and kind of like pulled the shenanigans today that they were doing then, would this be canceled, or would it be as kind of as hailed as it has been currently?
My guess is that it probably would have been canceled. Yes, and I think some people have canceled it all along for various reasons. That's a personal thing, I guess. I mean, I have many records that have probably been canceled by somebody or other, and that's their business. But they can't come in and throw things out of my record collection, tell me I'm a bad person for having this art in my collection. That's a fight that I would get into with somebody. So don't judge me from my record collection. That's stupid. What are you, 12 years old? Give me a break.
Right. Well, you are displaying it on Instagram. How is that going for you? Have you gotten any pushback from anything that you've shown off yet?
I don't put everything up there.
I thought so, because I was just like, no, you've passed clearly from Q to R.
I have some, extreme metal's tricky, because some of it is made by very extreme people whose views I do not agree with, frankly.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and even
but it's not like a huge factor in my record collection.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because
I have some controversial records. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll leave it at that. You're not going to post about them, right?
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I mean, we made it through the record.
Yeah, it's like an old time rock record, 45 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to remember that it's, it's creeping up on 30 years old right now. It's 28 years old. It's it is a classic rock record at this point.
Yeah. Wow.
To some people.
Oh. I know, right? Well, so what do you think about that? So for this record in particular, and I know you said that the first copy of this that you got was on CD. The CDs aren't so valuable, but like the vinyl of this record and the releases from this band are ridiculously expensive.
Yeah, I'll tell you why.
Why is that?
The first Mayhem record was a 12-inch EP called Death Crush, and it is very collectible, partially because the late guitar player Euronymous actually physically wrote on every single copy because there was elements of the print missing, so he filled in numbers and stuff on the album. So every copy of Death Crush on the original label has Euronymous' handwriting on it. So that's part of the talismanic appeal of that record in particular. And that was a DIY record, that was basically totally scraped together, and it was a raw, when that record came out, it affected a lot of people. So, I mean, Mayhem's had a lot of different phases, and they've had a lot of, they've influenced a lot of people in a lot of different ways. There's sort of a totemic band for metal in general, besides being black metal. So, I mean, they're an interesting band, worth checking out.
Yeah. Well, so if people want to check out your music, considering you have so much of it, and I am, honestly a novice to it as well. I mean, I've listened to some of the Flying Lutenbacher records.
Yeah.
I listened to some of the XBXRX.
XBXRX, yeah.
XBXRX.
Yeah.
That's a mouthful.
Oh yes, it sure is.
And then, of course, obviously some of the Retrovirus with Lydia Lunch.
Yeah.
I am interested in jazz.
Yeah.
What good, like, what kind of jazz should I get into that you've put out?
Well, I mean, most of my stuff is definitely in the realm of so-called free jazz or free improvisation. Yeah. So, I mean,
okay.
Yeah, most of my stuff is definitely on the experimental side, and it's, it's pretty uncompromising stuff. But I've been fortunate enough to play with a lot of heavy people, kind of legends, I would dare say. And, like a great record to start with if you're into crazy, heavy, acoustic free jazz with saxophones and drums and going nuts. I made a record in 2007 called Firestorm, and it features Marshall Allen, the alto player from the Sun Ra Orchestra. And it's
okay.
It is a earful,
Okay. No,
a wall of sound.
Firestorm. Sure. I will look into that then.
Excellent.
I will run down to my local record store and see if they have it.
They don't. I
guarantee
will check your
it. Website.
Yeah. Yeah, but you can hear it on the Bandcamp page with a lot of these things. So, there's always, I'm glad to have this thing. And also all my crap's on YouTube. I mean, I did not even upload it. It's just there. There's so much video and audio on YouTube of me. It's almost embarrassing. It's like, what the hell,
That's the new currency. That's okay.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
If you say so.
Yeah. I mean, hey, I'm no expert, but that's just what I hear. That's what the kids say.
Yeah. Well, it's a new world. People do things differently now, and that's how it is. Yeah.
We're just acclimating. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, got to roll with the punches. Can't control it.
Mm. No, certainly can't.
Yep.
Well, Weasel, I'd just like to say this was a very cool conversation, and I thank you for taking the time and having it with me.
Hope it wasn't too terrifying.
I got used to it. I acclimated. Yeah.
Good. Glad to hear it. All right, man.
I might even listen to some other Mayhem records at this point.
Oh my God. Well, let me recommend.
What's that other one you were talking about?
It's
the free
called
jazz,
Ordo Ad Chaos, like chaos without the S.
Okay.
It's I don't know. You might find it interesting. I think that's their other really great record, honestly. So I recommend that one. But it's more avant-garde for sure.
Mm-hmm. That's okay. Yeah. I'm willing to try it.
Cool.
I'm an experimenter. I'm okay with trying new things.
I'd love to know what you think of it.
Okay.
Cool.
I'll let you know. I'll send you a message.
Yeah. If you like my rock and roll side, check out the second Cellular Chaos record, Diamond Clenched Teeth. I'm very proud of that record.
Okay.
I would dare say it's somewhat accessible, but not really.
Okay.
Cool.
I'm willing.
All right.
Willing for sure.
Great.
Cool, man. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You have a good evening.
Until next time.
Final Vision is a Psychic Static production. Theme song written and performed by Jeff Robbins of 123 Astronaut.